Welcome, everybody, to another edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I am your host, Art Stapleton. It is Wednesday morning, and the building behind me is 1925 Giants Drive. The foundation is not shaken, but it was a seismic event for this franchise on Tuesday. Jaxson Dart, rookie first-round pick, is now QB1 for the New York Giants. Dart-Dable, Joe Schoen, and the rest of the organization have made the move that, let's be honest, we all thought was inevitable from the moment the Giants traded back up into the first round and picked Dart at 25. I had week 5 as when I thought Dart would come into the equation, and obviously we're 1 week early. We're going to talk all things Dart and Young-Ho Koo, North Jersey, Ridgewood's own, back with the Giants after the kicking situation with Graham Gano that seems on repeat. Unfortunately, Graham hurting his groin in pregame warmups on Sunday night. You all know that. We all saw what transpired. I have a feeling Gano is headed to the IR, at least for 4 weeks, to get that groin healed. So Koo is here after getting released in Atlanta. I thought that was the move to make for the Giants. They signed him to the practice squad. He was here yesterday with a tryout, and he is now signed to the practice squad. They can elevate him. They have some flexibility. Look, Koo is home now, and I think it's a good spot for him. The Giants like reclamation projects at kicker. Think about when they signed Graham Gano, previous administration, but Gano certainly turned it around, and I think the Giants believe that Koo has a lot of talent in that right leg, and has just kind of gotten off kilter the last year and a half. He was injured last year, kicked through it, had a lot of misses, a lot more misses. I mean, you're talking about somebody who's in the top 15 all-time of accuracy with field goals, and I think he had 8 or 9 misses last year for the Falcons. He missed a potential game-tying field goal in the closing seconds in Week 1 for Atlanta, and they ended up losing to Tampa Bay, would have forced overtime. But now Koo is here. But we're going to get more information on Koo from Dart-Dable later this morning. But that's really for another day, maybe for a later show. Let's talk Jaxson Dart. Embrace the Dart side. You guys know I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Jaxson, obviously, with his Anakin eye black under his one eye. And we go back to the draft between Jaxson Dart and his love for Anakin, and Abdul Carter for his love of Darth Vader. That's my wheelhouse. So hope you guys enjoyed the GIF thread that I put up on Twitter yesterday from Jaxson Dart as Anakin Skywalker and the stages of Jaxson Dart up until now. And now Sunday against the LA Chargers, and we're going to get all into it now. So I want to go back, and it's a column I wrote on NorthJersey.com for this morning. And I want to just make sure I have it accurate. You've got to go back. It was a conversation between Dart-Dable and Jaxson Dart after the Giants selected Dart. It was at Dart's draft party out in Utah. And we see this all the time. We see it through Giants Life. We see it through NFL films, the Welcome to the NFL, Hey Rookie, all of these behind the scenes that are kind of recorded for prosperity, but also recorded, let's see if we're going to use them. And it was a private conversation on the phone between Jaxson Dart and Dart-Dable. It was being recorded, and Dart was going from one room to a quiet place in the back, and he was getting ready to meet the media here on the conference call with us that night. And it was a conversation between Dable and Dart, and it usually happens, the coach or position coach, after getting welcomed here by the general manager, will talk to the head coach. And what we came to find out is that Dable and Dart had developed a relationship going all the way back from when they first met in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. And this conversation on Dable and Dart, it was really a private moment, but became public because it was on a video that was kind of floated out there, but it wasn't mainstream. So if you looked for it on social media, you could find it. And the conversation stuck with me. I wrote about it a little bit back in the spring, and I wrote about it in the lead to my column today, now that Jaxson Dart is quarterback 1 for the Giants. Russell Wilson will be QB2, and Jameis Winston will remain the emergency 3rd quarterback. We'll get more from Brian Dable, potentially some more insight later this morning. But anyway, this conversation. As they're hanging up, Brian Dable's kind of going through the details, telling Dart he's going to send them numbers for Russ and Jameis and Tommy DeVito, and back when Tommy was still here, obviously, it was a big part of his offseason. And Dable ended the conversation, said, "I'm banking on you." And Jaxson Dart replied, "Smart man." And as I wrote in the column this morning, we're going to find out how smart the Giants are, how smart Brian Dable is, because Jaxson Dart now has that opportunity to prove it. But you go back to that conversation and Dable revealing to Dart, knowing the relationship that they have, that Dable could be open with him. And he understands that Dart kind of understands the pressure of what this now becomes. Look, if the Giants made Jaxson Dart the starting quarterback, let's start there, because they thought that they could save their jobs, then it's the worst decision they could have made. Now, I don't believe that. I don't believe automatically Jaxson Dart saves Brian Dable's job, saves Joe Schoen's job. If anything, coming into week 4, it could hurt their jobs. If Jaxson Dart doesn't perform and ownership doesn't see from Jaxson Dart what they want to see, and that's success, be competitive, and give them a reason to believe in the future, it could hurt in the long run. They could look at Brian Dable and say, well, you picked this guy and now you can't make him succeed and he's not playing well. Maybe we just need to move on. And if the Giants lose enough where they're in the top 5 again in the draft and they want to make wholesale changes, they may just look at it and say they're going to reboot like Arizona did with Josh Rosen to Kyler Murray. Now, I'm not saying that's the blueprint, because we know Kyler Murray has had his shares of ups and downs. But that's where we're at right now. This is not an automatic that all of a sudden Brian Dable will be brought back because Jaxson Dart is now the starting quarterback. There's a lot of layers to it, and we can get into that. Obviously, we'll be following that the remainder of the season for as long as Jaxson is QB1 and how things play out. But I go back to that conversation with Dart and Dable because this is an inescapable reality, is that Jaxson Dart and Brian Dable are now attached to the hip. You could throw Joe Schoen in there as well, and this front office, but they have now gone to Jaxson Dart. So I have a couple of things that I wanted to talk about as far as Jaxson Dart. Why now? That'll be the first one. Why now? Why bench Russell Wilson just 1 week after he threw for 450 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys in a losing effort, a game that they would have won had the defense been able to make a play? They didn't. They lost in overtime. Russell threw the interception in overtime. That was not something you wanted to see. But why now? This was never going to be a soft landing spot for Jaxson Dart, not with the way the Giants' schedule is set up. Every soft landing spot that you could perceive would have followed up with an even bigger challenge. Case in point, let's say Jaxson Dart and you don't start him Sunday against the Chargers. 3-0, a good defense. Jesse Minter is running that defense. They have playmakers at different levels. That's the NFL. But let's say you hold him for a week. You want him to be on the road against a New Orleans team that is right now winless, just like the Giants. Giants, it'll probably be a pick 'em. Maybe New Orleans gets the home field 2.5, 3-point favorite. But the reality is that that's a game that the Giants look at and say, well, we could beat this team. Let's not forget the Saints look at that game and say, well, we can beat this team. But here's the deal. If Jaxson Dart does not start until week 5, he gets 3 days of practice with the first team offense, plays in New Orleans, and then has a short week with no on-field practice for a Thursday night game against the Eagles here at MetLife. By doing it this way, you now give Jaxson Dart 2 weeks of full weeks of practice with the first team. And then you'll get the short week for the Eagles. So as much as the opponent matters, you're going to go to the guy, you believe in the guy, you pull the trigger and go. It's just the way it is. And you want to give Jaxson Dart the longest runway for sustained success. You're not putting him in a game for this weekend just to say, hey, we have a chance to beat the Chargers. That's not why you play Jaxson Dart. Now, why? Why Russell Wilson to the bench? Brian Dable said after the game, and then on Monday when he left the door open for Jaxson Dart, it's the passing offense that has struggled. And with Russell Wilson, it's an all-or-nothing proposition. You saw from week 2 to week 3, I told you on last week's show, we knew Spags was going to put an umbrella over the top of the defense and say, beat us differently. And Russell Wilson's offense is essentially a chuck and duck. It worked against Dallas because for some reason Dallas never adjusted. Matt Eberflus never adjusted the back end. He allowed the Giants to split their safeties and make big plays down the field. Kansas City wasn't allowing them to do that. They doubled Malik Neighbors. The Giants were not as creative as they needed to be offensively. And Russell Wilson could not attack the middle of the field. The intermediate passing game was non-existent. And the Chiefs knew that. And they were able to take away what Russell Wilson does best. Make no mistake, Jaxson Dart is not going to all of a sudden be a better downfield passer than Russell Wilson. But if that's the only tool in Russell Wilson's toolbox right now, they need to diversify this offensive attack. Because when you get to the red zone, you can't rely on deep throws. And the way that game ended on Sunday night, that goal line stand with Russell Wilson throwing the ball out of the end zone instead of giving Theo Johnson a chance at the goal line, getting an intentional grounding, essentially throwing a fourth down ball through the uprights like you were playing a contest like in training camp when they were trying to hit the goalpost to get out of practice and get out of walkthroughs later in the game. Jameis won it. Don't forget. Remember how upset Jaxson Dart was that he didn't hit the goalpost? 4 of 18 passing from Russell Wilson in the red zone. 1 of 10 on third down the other night. You can't allow the defense to dictate your offense. There's too much of that. And when you have an offensive-minded head coach in Brian Dable, you're going to go down with the offense that you want to run. And Russell Wilson could not run an offense that countered what the defense was going to do. Does that mean that Jaxson Dart will? Remains to be seen. So that's why Russell Wilson is on the bench. Another aspect of this. This was not a situation, from what I've seen, what I've learned, what I've gathered, that the locker room was revolting against Russell Wilson. This was a situation now. This is a decision that Brian Dable and Jaxson Dart are going to have to sell to the locker room. Because there are guys in this locker room who still believe in Russell Wilson. There's no doubt about it. So how do you win them over? Well, Jaxson Dart has already done that. It's not like they look at Jaxson Dart and say, this kid's not ready. But you have to go out and produce. And that goes for offensive personnel. It goes for the defense. Jaxson Dart has hit all the markers up until this point to be a franchise quarterback. But now the rubber meets the road. Now it's about making it happen in games that count. We've seen plenty of guys who have succeeded in the preseason, and then they get to the regular season and they fall apart. Jaxson Dart has to prove that that's not going to be him. And I think it's an important aspect of this. So that's another thing. Are the fans a part of this? I've gotten that question. There's no question that the aspect of Russell Wilson getting booed out of the building plays a factor here. A small factor, nonetheless. But the Giants introduced their defense on Sunday night. So the offense is getting introduced this Sunday. That's the logical step, I would imagine. I don't know for sure what the Giants are going to do, but you would imagine that they're going to have all the bells and whistles and the smoke through the tunnel for the offense. If Russell Wilson comes out and immediately gets booed, you're setting a tone here that will just have picked up where Sunday night left off. Really, we're picked up. You've lost 9 of your last 10 home games. The mood needs to change. Now, you're not starting Jaxson Dart because you don't want Russell Wilson to get booed. You're starting Jaxson Dart because you believe that you can make them cheer. Win the crowd, right? We had Justin Tuck on Friday's show, and it was the glimpse of Gladiator. When I said to Justin about how he used to wear that shirt, are you not entertained? Maximus in the Coliseum. Win the crowd. Win your freedom. The Giants have to win over the crowd on Sunday. Now, with Jaxson Dart at quarterback, it's a lot easier. But if Russell Wilson hits a deep shot against Kansas City and they score a touchdown, the crowd's not booing Russell Wilson. But you couldn't continue this back and forth of sending Jaxson Dart out, bringing Russell Wilson off, then sending Russell Wilson back on. It just was not sustainable. So now Jaxson Dart is the quarterback. So, like I said, there is a component here. Don't let anyone tell you, it has nothing about saving jobs. Of course there's a global component to this. Jaxson Dart is the quarterback of the future. He's been drafted to be the quarterback of the future. The Giants need to win and be competitive to prove that for this regime, for Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, that it's not just a continuation of the last 2+ years. Everyone is calling Brian Dable, he's a bum. He doesn't know what he's doing. In 2022, you walked around with his face on your T-shirts. You believed in Brian Dable. Now, has he been handed a rough hand the last couple of years? Has it been part of his own doing? Did he have a quarterback last year at Daniel Jones that all of a sudden in Indianapolis believes in himself? That last year the Giants set him up and Jones never got out of his head and didn't believe in what he was seeing? Is that coaching? Is that Daniel Jones? Is that the organization? Whatever it is, it's reality. You're here now. You have to give your chance, the team, the best chance that you think you can have sustained success. Now, do the Giants believe that this gives them the better chance to win on Sunday? It's not necessarily just about Sunday. It's what do you give your team the best chance to do over the long term, over the next month, over the next 2 months, and where are you going from there? Where are you getting the offensive diversity to be able to compete and counterpunch some of the defense that you're going to see? And I think that is a big part of this. And I think that's why, even though Brian Dable will be asked job security questions today, there's no question about it. He will be asked about it, and he will say, this was done in the best interest of this team. They're going to dance around the answer because it's complicated. You don't want to push Russell Wilson under the bus. Now, some will say, hey, by benching him, you've already pushed him under the bus. The Giants have gained something here from having Russell Wilson as a Giant. People don't want to believe that. They paid $10 million for Russell Wilson to be the front man. You see yesterday, that's Russell Wilson spending his Tuesdays in children's hospitals and being that front man. It doesn't mean that other quarterbacks can't do that, but that is in Russell Wilson's wheelhouse. he's brought a positivity to the room, a way to do the work. And even if Russell Wilson wasn't vocal, throwing his arm around Jaxson Dart once the season started, Jaxson Dart got to see how a 10-time Pro Bowler worked. And he certainly did that. And he certainly saw that. And you hope that rubs off. Now, Russell Wilson will stay here for now as the number 2 quarterback. The Giants have no reason right now to let Russell Wilson go. I saw people saying, just cut Russell Wilson. They're paying him $10 million, $10.5 million. Why would you let him go? You let him stay here. As long as he's not going to be put out there as scout team safety, which is not going to happen. That aspect of Daniel Jones happened. He was benched, but also because of that injury guarantee. There's no more guaranteed money that is going to trigger if Russell Wilson gets hurt in practice. That's what they were worried about with Daniel Jones. That's why they let Daniel Jones go, because the Giants were essentially going to not play Daniel Jones. They could play Russell Wilson again this season. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go back to him because Jaxson Dart is struggling, but we've seen things happen. Look, if Jaxson Dart goes out there and has an injury or ends up, in concussion protocol or something of that nature, Russell Wilson will go back in the game. Now, you hope that doesn't happen for Jaxson Dart. Obviously, as my wife would say, tweet, tweet, tweet. That is not happening. You don't want an injury to any of your players. But Russell Wilson really is in no situation to go to Joe Shane's office, to go to John Mara the way Daniel Jones did and say, trade me, get me out of here, release me. It's not going to happen. There's no market for Russell Wilson right now. Could there be a market for Russell Wilson? I guess ultimately there could be, but I don't see that right now. So for the time being moving forward, I would imagine Russell Wilson is going to be a good teammate, the same way that Jaxson Dart and Jameis Winston have been for him. And you'll see where this goes. Is there an awkwardness involved? Of course. There was always going to be an awkwardness involved. It was awkward when Daniel Jones took over in week 3 of 2019 for Eli Manning. Do I expect Russell Wilson to stand in front of microphones and cameras every week now as the number 2 quarterback? No. I would imagine Russell Wilson will talk today at some point, or at some point this week. Let Jaxson have his spotlight today. He'll talk at some point this week, and then Russell Wilson will go into his role as number 2. Do you expect him to be there for Jaxson Dart? Sure, as a teammate. But I don't expect Russell Wilson to all of a sudden be sitting there with Jaxson Dart at 8 o'clock at night, breaking down film with the Chargers, saying this is how we should attack them. They've done that. They've gotten to this point. And now they move forward with Jaxson Dart. So Jaxson Dart last week is in a position where he's taking Zoom calls, FaceTimes from position coaches, from Shea Tierney, from Mike Kafka in the locker room, talking about the period that they had after that we've talked to you about, running through the first team script after the team, for the most part, goes into the building. Now it's Jaxson Dart's show. And I wrote this. Jaxson Dart has spent this season trying to be Jaden Daniels, Dak Prescott, and Patrick Mahomes in practice. And from all accounts that I've talked to, he's done a good job with the scout team. Now Jaxson Dart gets to be Jaxson Dart. And there's an excitement there. There's certainly a bump that this building will get. There's the uncertainty of what Jaxson will bring. Now the assumption is made that it'll all be good. It could be bad. It could be rough. It could be Eli Manning levels against the Baltimore Ravens from his rookie year with the 0.0 passer rating. The Blatarski. Eli came out the other end, clearly. So what do we expect this Giants offense to look like with Jaxson Dart? Well, I think you saw a lot of it in the summer. I think you're going to see some zone read. I think you're going to see more mobility from Jaxson Dart to keep a defense honest. I think what you'll see is more of an intermediate game, trying to get guys in space, knowing where his reads are. Maybe a little improvisation, a lot more improvisation than what Russell had. Although Russell did have a nice improv play to Scadaboo the other night, flipped the ball over the defender, and Scadaboo got a nice gain. I think you're obviously going to see more Cam Scadaboo. Jaxson Dart and Cam Scadaboo are sitting next to each other in the locker room. They're locker neighbors. They have a good bond. Now that Tyrone Tracy is likely on the shelf, probably be heading to IR at some point with the shoulder injury, just seems to be the smartest thing to do, to give him that 4-week chance to get 100% healthy. You dislocate your shoulder, you're looking at least 4 weeks, especially that position, the pounding he's going to take at a running back spot. It's how he dislocated his shoulder in the first place. So that's where they're at. There's a little mystery as to what this offense is going to look like, but I think that's what you're looking at. So Jaxson Dart is the 6th rookie quarterback to start a game, or he will be on Sunday, since the merger here in the NFL for the New York Giants. The 6th rookie quarterback. Who were the previous 5? Well, Phil Simms, 1979. That worked out well. Although, let's be honest, Giants fans from back then in the early 80s will tell you that it was not working well, that Phil Simms was not the guy. There were a lot of people who looked at the rookie from Morehead State and said, why do we have him here? And we all know what Phil ended up doing. Then you go to 1992. Kent Graham started 3 games. He was a rookie, an 8th round pick. Remember the days when the NFL was an 8-round draft, or more than that, but there was actually an 8th round. Obviously, things did not work out for Kent Graham. Dave Brown never started a game when he was a rookie. So let's fast forward to Daniel Jones, 2019, and him starting a game, and where they're at as far as that goes. You know, you had Eli Manning, who was number 3, Daniel Jones, who was number 4. We all know how the first year started with Daniel Jones. Game 3 in Tampa, 32-31, ran for 2 touchdowns, threw for 2 touchdowns. The Evan Ingram play at the end, at the beginning of the third quarter, coming out of the half. Danny Dimes was born that preseason and continued for that season. But no guarantees. Pat Shurmur was fired at the end of the season. And then we know how Daniel Jones has ended up. We all know how Eli Manning ended up. The last game of the 2004 season, he audibles to Tiki Barber. Tiki Barber runs it in. They beat the Cowboys. And John Mara shared a story of going down the stairwell at the old Giant Stadium with his father, Wellington, and Wellington looking at John saying, I think we've got our quarterback. And they ended up with the best quarterback in franchise history. No disrespect to Phil Simms or Y.A. Tittle or Fran Tarkenton, Charlie Connerly, guys who have been here. It's Eli Manning. The two of the 4 Vince Lombardi trophies that are in there say so. The 2 Super Bowl MVPs say so. And then the other rookie quarterback that started for the New York Giants, the undrafted free agent from North Jersey, Tommy DeVito, won 3 games in 2023. 3 games that cost the Giants a chance at Jaden Daniels and Drake May in the draft. We know that. But that's why Tommy DeVito and what he did as a rookie quarterback, really, when you look at the grand scheme of things and the full scope, he was the 5th quarterback as a rookie to get a start for the Giants. And he won 3 games, including on Monday Night Football against the team that ended up in the playoffs in Green Bay. And Tommy DeVito was the one who drove the Giants down the field to get that game-winning field goal. So Jaxson Dart is now number 6. Number 6. Again, there's a lot of meaning to Jaxson Dart's number. Whether it was intentional or not, Jaxson Dart, the sixth rookie quarterback to start for the Giants since the merger in 1970. And I just laid out, you can look more into that on NorthJersey.com, have that story about the legacy of the rookie quarterback for the New York Giants since 1979 when Phil Simms was that guy. So check that out. All of our Giants coverage, please, if you can, subscribe. Go into your search engine, type NorthJersey.com subscriptions, find a digital subscription. You should be able to get the next 6 months for $1. $1. Now, I have a lot of you telling me you're hitting the paywall when you click on my story links. That means you are going to our site often to read my coverage of the Giants or read other coverage that we have. Great story on Carson Shane and Walker Snee for the Bergen-Bosco showdown this week from Greg Tartaglia, my colleague from the Varsity Aces, the high school sports section that I started with at the Record. I was one of the original Varsity Aces. So Greg had us a great story on there. But people want to know, well, why can't we buy it? We don't have a subscription. Go get it. Do it for me. You like this show? All in? You're all in? I know, it's a lot to ask. You're subscribing to everything nowadays. Netflix, now you've got ESPN Plus, Prime Video, Apple TV. You're all over the place. Give us that $1. I promise for the next 6 months our coverage will be more than worth it. We are going on the road with the Giants. We will be at every game. Trips are already booked. We're going. Our company is making the investment in this coverage of the New York Giants, of All In, for Paul Wood and myself, what we've created here, this little community here for the Giants coverage. You've seen some bad times. We've grown our coverage in the worst possible time for the New York Giants. Think about that. You have bought in to our coverage with the Giants when things have gone about as badly as they have for this franchise in a decade and a half. We didn't start this in 2007. We didn't start this in 2011 when the Giants were Super Bowl champions. We started this when they were shuffling through head coaches like a kid trying to find a prom date. We appreciate you being all in. And Paul Wood and I appreciate everything that we've seen from our coverage here. The commitment that you've made on YouTube. We see the numbers going up. The commitment you still make with our audio podcasts on all the platforms that are there. Everything on NorthJersey.com, across the USA Today Network. Our post-game all-ins, all of our coverage post-game. That's because of you. We create it because of you. And this is a new chapter for the Giants now. Jaxson Dart is here. And he's going to start at quarterback. Get in on a ground level. Because we will be here. We will be all in. And as Justin Tuck said last Friday, we're all in. This is it. This is our coverage. This is the team that you have chosen to root for. You live and die with them. And now Jaxson Dart is your ride or die. He's your QB1. He's your guy. And like I said, I'm not sitting at home on the couch reading through transcripts, watching videos, and then giving you my opinion. I'm here. The brick building behind me is where this team is. This is the centralized location of the New York Giants. Over there, MetLife Stadium. Everywhere this team is, that's where you're going to find us. That's where you'll find me. So, hope you guys enjoyed this emergency podcast, so to speak, dealing with Jaxson Dart. Hope I gave you everything that you needed to hear about Jaxson Dart and where we're at. And we will have much more here from the Giants and from Jaxson Dart. Dart-Dable talks today. They'll have practice, and then they'll move on at this point into a new era that begins Sunday against the Chargers. And then in New Orleans, and then Thursday night against the Eagles, and then in Denver, I will be there. I will be your eyes and ears. And you don't always have to agree with me. You don't. You're fans. Fans can be as emotional as they want to be. And I put this out there the other day, and I think I'm going to end the show with this. Look, I'm fired up. I have a passion about my job and covering the New York Giants and the NFL. But I am not a fan. I don't have the allowance to be a fan of this team. So that means I can't get emotional when they win, and I can't get emotional when they lose. Sure, there are going to be emotions, but I can't allow that or let that affect my coverage. So if you expect me to come on here and call for people's jobs and call the head coach an idiot and a fool for the way he is and make up nicknames for Joe Shane and say that, he just needs to be fired and John Mara is a dope and put things out there with, clown faces everywhere. You're entitled to that as a fan base. That's not how I would fan when I'm a fan of teams. I'm a Yankee fan. But when I covered the Yankees as a general assignment reporter for the record, I couldn't be a Yankees fan. I couldn't be an NFL fan when I started covering the NFL. So at this point, if you're expecting to have me come on here and scream and yell about how this team sucks, I'm going to tell you why they're losing, or why I think they're losing, and why they're not performing. And I'm going to call out what I think are the problems here. And if you don't think I'm a straight shooter and you want to find someone else who you believe shoots it more straight than I do, there's a lot of people out there who talk about the New York Giants. And I'm all for it. Go ahead. Enjoy it. I'm not going to tell you need to constantly have chocolate chip mint ice cream, which happens to be my favorite. If I'm chocolate chip mint ice cream and you prefer Rocky Road and I'm not giving you Rocky Road, go find Rocky Road. But I don't want to lose anybody in this audience. I want you here with me. I want you here with us. Paul Wood and I worked too hard on this All In podcast from the ground up, now in year 5, to chase people away. We want to give you everything you want and more in covering this team. And that's why we're all in. And we know you're all in too. And we're going to stay all in. Day 1 of the Jaxson Dart era begins today. Hope I answered all your questions. If I didn't, please reach out. Email me, stapleton@northjersey.com. That's STAPLETON @northjersey.com. You can send me private messages. You want to talk in the chat on the YouTube page, I will find your messages. I will talk to you. I will exchange. I will engage in everything you want about the New York Giants as best as I can. If you want to talk Star Wars, you want to talk pro wrestling, I happen to dabble in that as well. So that's where we got you about 40 minutes this morning. I got to start getting ready for Dart-Dable's press conference here at the Giants. But for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. Keep reading everything we got at northjersey.com. Keep watching All In. Follow me on all our social channels, the TikTok videos, over 100,000 views of Jaxson Dart content per week on TikTok. Art Stapleton across the board, no underscore. If you want a piece of Giants coverage, I'm trying to do the best I can over here to give you that one-man gang approach, being all in. So thanks to Paul. Thanks to all of you for watching. I'm Art Stapleton. Keep reading on northjersey.com, and we will be all in with the New York Giants and the Jaxson Dart era starting today.